Hello, everybody. Today, I would like to talk about comparative advantage. One thing to note, I'm going to do both output and input. Well, that's to note. I'm going to do the output first, and then we'll do the input, which is exactly the opposite. But what does it mean to do an output problem? So I took, let's assume we have two countries and only two countries, and we have two goods produced, mac and cheese. Let's say that Italy can produce 30 units of macaroni in a day. Let's say Italy can produce 10 units of cheese in a day. In the same day, for example, France can only produce 20 units of macaroni, or it could produce 40 units of cheese. So just have a look at the notes here because I'm going to erase them. But what if we're looking at Italy? In one day, Italy can produce or output 30 units or 10 units of cheese. Or they can do a combination. But just realize Italy cannot produce both 30 units of macaroni and 10 units of cheese. So let's see what it looks like. Just so we're on the same page, let's draw Italy. And let's say Italy can, and we'll call Italy. All right, and this would be the mac, and this would be the cheese. Okay, so we're illustrating, just to prove a point, that Italy can have it all. If Italy decided to produce 30 units of macaroni, it can do so, and it would produce here. But just realize it would be outputting no cheese. If all of Italy's factors of production, land, labor, capital goods, and entrepreneur resources were devoted towards the production of macaroni, at very best it could do, Italy is 30. If Italy decided, hey, we need some cheese, well, what this says is, could Italy produce 10 units of cheese? Yes, they can. But at what cost? They wouldn't have any resources left over to produce macaroni. So if they want to produce cheese, they can, and they can produce 10 units at 0 mac. It also works this way. Could Italy produce half of each? Of course, they could. Could Italy produce 15 units of mac? Yes. But then it would be using about half of its resources to produce half of what it can for mac. So then the other half of the resources could be devoted to cheese. And so, just bear with me with my graph, but you could see Italy could produce 15 units of mac, for example, and 5 units of cheese, or any combination that lies within this production possibilities curve. All right, let me just draw for illustrative purposes. Let's have a look at France. Now, France can produce 40 units of cheese, and we'll call this one France. France can produce 40 units of cheese, or at best 20 units of mac. Same thing. Could France decide to produce, say, exactly half of it? Yeah. If France decided, you know what, we only need 10 units of mac, well, then it would have half of its resources left over to devote towards the production of cheese, and it could achieve a production level of 20 units of cheese, or keep in mind any combination therein. All right, I think a lot of us realize that, but I just wanted to show that. All right, so how do we figure out how to do this question? How do we figure out who should produce what? Again, just real quick, if Italy was only, if Italy was a closed economy and Italy only produced two goods, this is dripping with theory, folks. Please, we're boiling it down to two goods, two countries. But just to reiterate, if Italy was producing and acting all by themselves, this is the best they could do. And don't forget, the name of the game is growth. The name of the game is to be able to produce outside of one's front production possibilities frontier, because that is the pathway to economic growth and a lower standard of living, or higher standard of living, better standard of living. All right, so how do we figure this out? Let's see. If we want to know who should produce what, All right, let's see. Who should produce macaroni or mac? Let's look at Italy. So we're going to just focus on the macaroni side. The first thing we do is we are going to need to get this equivalent to 1. All right, so we're going to put both numerators as the denominator, and we're going to bring that to 1. Now, what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So just remember, though, which denominators to use. So for Italy, I'm going to go 30 over 30 equals 1, of course. We'll come over here. We'll bring the 30 here. And that, of course, would equal 1/3. We're going to use the same denominator here, France 20. All right, so just remember, whatever this numerator is, and we put the same number as the denominator, and now over here we have to do a little work, and that would, of course, equal 2. Now, who should produce macaroni? Well, the law of opportunity cost, or the law of comparative advantage, is the country that can produce the good at a lower opportunity cost enjoys the comparative advantage. So, which number is lower, 1/3 or 2? Obviously, 1/3 is lower or less than 2. So, check it out. We were doing mac, and we circled 1/3, which is the lower opportunity cost, and the circle is Italy. So right there, we just figured out that Italy equals comparative advantage in macaroni. Now, real quick, folks, especially since this exam is going to be a little shorter than usual, real quick, if Italy enjoys the comparative advantage in the production of one good, in this case macaroni, automatically the other country, France, will enjoy the comparative advantage of the other good. So I'm going to compute that for you in a moment as soon as I get this down. But just know, if you want to save time, you don't have to do the French computations as I will now. But France will have the comparative advantage in the other good, which is cheese and cheese. More on that in a second. All right. So let us now get rid of this stuff, and let me just show you or prove to you that France does indeed have the comparative advantage in the production of cheese. Okay, and this is good practice. Okay, so let's see. What are we asking ourselves? We're saying, okay, who should produce cheese, Italy or France? Well, let's look at cheese. We go down the cheese column, we go to Italy. We got Italy can produce 10 units of cheese. Let's just make that equal to 1. Don't forget, if we use whatever denominator we use here, we use on the other side. 30 over 10 equals 3, right? All right, cheese. We're going to make sure, we're trying to figure out the comparative advantage of cheese, and that's why we're dealing and we're equating the cheese to 1. We take the 40 as the denominator there, we put it there, and 20 over 40, of course, reduces to 1/2. Now, we got ones over here. Leave that alone. We're trying to figure out who should produce cheese. So we got to look at which number is lower. Who is sacrificing less in terms of macaroni when they're producing cheese? And obviously 1/2 is less than 3. Therefore, France enjoys the comparative advantage, 1/2, for cheese. And so France equals comparative advantage in cheese, and there you have it. Now, a couple of things that you will have to do on the exam if you're asked to do one of these. When we say Italy has the comparative advantage in macaroni, that means they will export mac. Because what Italy will do now is they will produce the heck out of macaroni. They're not going to produce cheese. They're going to rely on their trading partner France to produce the cheese. They're going to produce mac and lots of it. And they're going to hopefully produce enough macaroni to satisfy their own domestic needs and then trade the surpluses. And that's the recipe to growth. So they're going to export mac and they're going to import cheese. Over here, for France, the opposite is true. France will produce cheese and export surpluses, cheese, and they will import that which they're not producing. In this case, import macaroni. Okay? All right, now let me just show you why this is free trade is beneficial to all countries involved. Always remember that a country will never undertake an endeavor unless it benefits them. So let's just be sure and make sure it benefits them. So here's the question. Trading terms. Trading terms of 1 to 1. In other words, would both these countries trade 1 Mac for 1 cheese? Again, only if it benefits them. Italy cares about Italy first. France cares about France first. So they're only going to conduct trade if it benefits them. So, all right, I like explaining it this way. Italy's going to produce, Italy enjoys comparative advantage in mac and cheese. That means they're going to produce mac and they're going to export surpluses. We said that. So Italy's going to produce 30 units, okay? Let's say, well, as I showed before, could Italy take half of its resources toward the production of macaroni and devote those resources to the production of cheese? Yeah, they could. And if they devoted exactly half of those resources, let's say they would produce exactly half of the best they can do in macaroni of 30. That means they have half of their productive resources to devote to cheese, and then if they do so, they can, in other words, Italy can produce here 15 units of mac and 5 units of cheese. Now, let's say Italy did indeed produce 30 units of mac. Would it be beneficial for Italy to trade 1 mac for 1 cheese? Let's make the numbers easy. How about 15 macaroni for 15 cheese? Well, if Italy produced 30 macaroni, right, they took 15 of them and they sold them. I'm going to go around the world here, even though they're... And they sold those 15 units to France. Well, if it's a 1 for 1, if they're trading 15 units of macaroni to France, they're getting in return 15 units of cheese. Well, look what happens. They could enjoy 15 units of macaroni and not just 5 units of cheese, not 10 units of cheese, but they could get back 15 units of cheese from France, and that would put them outside of their PPF. And that is where everybody wants to be. So, in other words, if Italy focused on the production of macaroni and produced macaroni and then conducted free and fair trade with France, could it benefit itself? Yes. Now, France is not going to do this for Italy's benefit. They're only going to do it if it benefits them. So let's see if it does. All right, same thing, 1 for 1, right? So let's say, for example, that France produced 40 units of cheese, right? Let's say then it sold 20 units to Italy for 20 units of mac. So now they sell off 20 units of cheese and they're producing here. But now, because of trade, they can enjoy more than 10 units of macaroni. As a matter of fact, they would be here, right? Just to reiterate, they produced 40. They sold 20 cheese for 20 mac. And that would put them at 20. Oh, I missed that. That was horrible. That would put them there. And so, indeed, a 1-to-1 terms of trading ratio for France would benefit her because she would then be producing outside of production possibilities curve, and it would also serve Italy well for conducting trade with the terms of 1-to-1. So really quick, a quick wrap up. Most of the problems on the AP exam are output problems, but sometimes they're input problems. And I'm going to do that now, but let's just reiterate. So this was an output problem. This means that in any one day, any one work period, whatever the time is, as long as it's constant for both countries. So let's call it a work day. In one work day, at best, Italy can produce 30 units of mac or 10 units of cheese. So long story short, if countries do what they do best and trade freely with one another, there is a very good chance that we can get a mutual benefit from free trade, and that is why economists love free trade. Now we'll do input.